My name is Ursula, and I am the performance coach, and I work for ENCE.
I met Urszula. I didn't actually meet her. I saw her working during an event in Valencia. And then, of course, when I was desk hosting for the Paris Major, I saw her there with ENCE. I also heard her more than I saw her because Urszula gets super excited when her team does well. You can hear her shouting, motivating them. I don't think they can hear her, but she makes sure everyone else can. And then I did ESL Challenge at Katowice, and I actually had a chance to sit with her and chat and learn a little bit more about what she does and her team. And I think her job is incredibly fascinating and multifaceted. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand what it is she does. Maybe they see her taking players' water and they presume that she's like a momager, but she's actually a performance coach and she works on so many different levels with players individually and then players as a team. And I thought that she would be so interesting to chat to from an esports perspective to find out what it is she actually does. She is going to break that all down. I don't want to do that for you, but I like to give you a little bit of an introduction before we begin. And of course, if you've just got here, this is Tech Girl Talks. It is my podcast series. This is season 4, and I'm titling it That's My Job. The idea is to showcase some of the amazing jobs that you can get in the esports industry and some of the amazing people who do them. So let's jump right into it. I think when we start, I mean, I've seen you at so many events. You're always the positive one. There's always a big smile on your face. But I think the first time I saw you might have been in DreamHack Valencia, and I was so curious because at the time I had no clue what it is that you actually do. So I think the best way to start is to explain, if you can explain to myself and the listeners, what it is that you do. What is your job?
I am a performance coach. Right now, I'm also finishing my second master degree in sport psychology. I've got business psychology degree, but I'm also finishing the sport one. So I have performance coaching and sports psych at the same time. And I work with esport teams, but not only, I also work with sport athletes. And what I do is I'm helping players to maximize their potential through doing everything outside of the strat, outside of the game. So managing their mental, their well-being, their sleep, the conflicts, focus, visualization, stress resistance. So everything that the players struggle with outside of the game, you could tell that it falls on me basically.
So you're a bit like an esports parent, if you like. And I mean, not just esports, like a parent to the athletes, because you're handling like sleep, food, like if they're fighting with one another, a bit like how a parent would deal with the siblings. I mean, you're doing that, but on a much more professional, serious level to ensure the best performance.
I mean, yeah, like you could tell it like that. Like sometimes my players are calling me mom, and probably just for like, just for the sake of laughing and just having fun a little bit. But yeah, like but it's a little bit different than being a parent because at this point, the goal is a little bit different. We all are on the same boat and we all want to achieve a specific goal that leads to like lifting the trophy. So if you look at this, then when there's a relationship parent with versus kid, there's always a battle, and quite often the kids are battling because they just want to do stuff their own way. But in here, the goal is that we all want to lift the trophy. So there needs to be a certain level of trust. There needs to be a certain level of understanding that uh, I aim their well-being and I aim to maximize their potential. So whatever I do is only to make them better on stage, better in competition. So the cooperation is a little bit better. And I feel like some of the stuff we talk about with the players, they are not the stuff that a kid and a mom or a dad would talk about. So yeah, so it's a type of like a lot of stuff that are work related that we cover, but there are like a lot of things that are outside of work that are having an impact, whether these are relationships, whether there's other stuff that I also cover with my players because it's all about well-being, and if something is bugging you outside of the game, at some point it can impact your performance. So I would say I am a little bit closer than mom and dad, but on a different type of level.
Well, this is the thing, because I mean, I likened it to a parental relationship, but it's really not. Because at the end of the day, if you're a standalone athlete and you're hiring a performance coach, it's obviously you're hiring someone to improve how you perform. But at the same time, you deal with a team, so you're obviously hired by the organization, I presume. Does that become quite difficult to balance the needs of the player versus ultimately the needs of the person paying your bills?
Um, you know, I worked with different orgs, and different orgs they have different, let's say, priorities. Some of the orgs they're aiming, just players' well-being. Some of the orgs they want to be a little bit more hands-on with like what's going on with the team. So it all depends, like what's the story inside of the inside of the org. Yes, I have to be the bridge between the players and the org, and there are quite a lot of topics that I do not reveal and I cannot reveal to my employees because it's all about players' well-being, and I don't want them to kind of have, some of the stories that are like not needed for the owners as long as the player is performing. So there is a certain level of confidentiality from both sides that I need to keep. So from the org to the players and also from the players to the org. So I would treat myself if I look at my relationship or like my role in the org, it's like a bridge between the players and the org, and it kind of works both ways.
Is it difficult for you? I mean, like I said, I've seen you at events. You've got to be positive when the team is feeling a little bit down. You've got to lift them up. How hard is it for you? Because I think a lot of people don't understand with, especially with like a Counter-Strike team, you're on the road all the time. You're traveling as well. You're living in hotels. You don't really, you've got to eat catering. You don't get a lot of sleep. So obviously some days, I mean, as great as Counter-Strike is, there's got to be days where maybe you haven't had a good night's rest. You're feeling a little bit down. How do you keep your energy so positive to motivate your team when maybe from a personal point of view your social battery's drained?
To be honest, like a lot of things I do to comfort my players, I have to do them myself to keep myself positive, to keep myself energized, like if that works on me, it works on them as well. Like at some point, that level of awareness, what I am allowed to do and what I'm not, uh, that's something that I always try to bring to the table, and I always try to show them like, hey, it's a good day, even though we maybe had a rough start, there's this that we need to focus. And when they see I believe in things and I'm positive and I see that they are capable of doing something, they're actually doing it. Yes, there are days that I'm feeling a little bit worse, but then I'm trying to kind of push it. Like, I don't know, like some of my thoughts, I'm trying to either sort it out as quickly as I can or delegate it somewhere, like just not to think about too many things, because if my focus drifts away a lot from work when I'm doing event, I cannot focus on looking at their faces and seeing like, oh, he's stressed or he's upset or this and that is happening. um a lot of things at my work is down to reading how the players behave on stage. And what I'm really I would say negative about is that I do not have a headset in all of the tournaments that I could listen to the comps, I could listen to the things. I can only guess things from their faces. I can only guess things from based on what we do in Prague and then what they do during the game. And when I know that, hey, that was a little bit different in Prague and this is something that is not clicking, then in between the games I can actually point things out. But I do like a lot tools from the event organizers, especially CS ones, where I do not have access to the audio. When I was coaching League of Legends, we kind of did had access to the headset, so I could also hear the comms in the backstage. That was helping me a lot, and that was helping me to be in the player's head like precisely. So I knew why these things happen, and if it's reasonable, then it's fine. If it's not, then I don't. Then I can actually act on things. In here, quite a lot of things depends on me guessing what's the situation. So if I'm not in the right mood, if my thoughts are somewhere else, I cannot focus on them. So it's just I think I'm into the habit that when I'm in the event, I need to shut everything else down. I'm in the event, and if I can chill, if I can relax, it's usually, or if I need to think about stuff, it's usually like the evening, um, when I can like speak with my family, with my partner, with my friend, where we can just laugh and chill. And she knows that, for example, I need a lot to kind of vent out, not work, but like other stuff. So we just change topics, and I get myself energized. So I also surround myself with people that give me energy. So whenever I'm down, I just try to get rid of that as soon as possible, so my work is like not impacted.
I'm curious because you mentioned that you have to learn to like read the players' faces and figure out their emotions. Is that something you can study though? Because I feel like that's a skill that some people have where they're a bit more empathetic and they can read people versus something that you could potentially learn in a book.
I would say it's a lot about intuition and like how you understand people and what you can read from the faces. I mean, there are certain books that are talking about like, emotional intelligence and so on, but it all goes down to how well you know the players. When you know what is the grim on their faces, and when they're using it, you just see it on stage and you're just like, okay, I know what's happening right now. So it all goes down to also getting to know to the players. I would say it's a healthy combination of getting to know to the people you work with, seeing them daily in the event, or like seeing them, getting up in the morning and being pretty low energy in the breakfast, so I already know something is happening. So it's all about kind of, the closer you are with them, the better it is for your relationship and for like the like on spot support when it's needed. So that's one thing. Intuition is another thing, but then emotional intelligence is also something that is actually very appreciated in this job, and I probably didn't realize it until now when you just said that. So I feel like I've always been a pretty intuitive about people, and I think since I remember, people were just like open and coming to me saying like, hey, let's just talk about this. How would you handle this? It's also feel like there is a certain level of trust when you kind of feel people are listening to you, they want to support you, and I think that's the impression I'm making quite a lot in my work. So that's also helping.
And you mentioned that you get to hear the comms in prac and stuff. So does that mean like if, say for example, for your job, you are when the team is practicing, when they're scrimming, you're jumping in, you're listening to that. It's not just traveling with them to events. You're very much involved with them outside of the competitive aspects.
Yes, I mean, I'm not sitting in like all those pracs like to like every single day, but like every second day, I'm jumping in for like one or two games just to see like what's the energy, what's the vibe, is there any conflict? Quite often, during prac, especially if there is something new we're training, or when there's a new player, or when there's a new patch or something, there are a lot of conflicts around because people have different vision on what's going to happen or like what's going on in the game. So these are the moments when they're pretty, I would say, intensive, for those type of spotting of like how people are managing the change. And now CS2 is coming, so probably that will also have like in there we will probably experience a lot of conflicts. So I am definitely visible here and there. I'm also doing quite a lot of things in the background, stuff like, I don't know, player performance reviews, individual talks. So it's not only traveling, but it's also doing stuff like, meeting the players once a week or one or twice a week, depending on the need. Um, just like for one-to-ones, for just covering like, hey, I've noticed this. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can help you out with? Is there anything you want to talk about? And quite often, if they're private stuff, we also talk about those. If there are some stuff work related or like game related or players related, we also try to find solutions into it. So I'm not always trying to be like, hey, in order to achieve trust, you need to do A, B, C, D. It's more like, hey, what do you feel like? What do you feel like it is when you trust a person? What do you think the person needs to do to be trusted? And then the players are just like, trying to find their own solutions into things. It's just like, regular session with psychologists. You do not go to psychologists to say like, hey, I've got issues with my boyfriend, can you help me out with it? Like, can you tell me if I should break up or not? Like, that's not my role, but I can definitely try to dive deeper into some aspects with the players, and then we know that, hey, that is fixed. I'm always telling my players, the more invisible I am in some of the stuff I do, and then they change, not feeling like it's because of this, it's because of that, it means like my job is done well. Because if they feel like that I'm forcing them to change and it's not coming from them, then they'll be resistant, and then there will be tension, and then there'll be like this parent kid relationship. No, I don't want to do it. So I'm always trying to drag them into certain ideas, or I'm always trying to show them specific direction during the prac, during one-to-ones, or like during the bootcamp. Like now we're going to have with ENCE bootcamp. So we kind of share the specific vision, set specific goals, and then we just try to achieve them step by step.
I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning because this is like a question when we were all in school, we always got asked this question, which is what do you want to be when you grow up? So I'm curious, when you were younger and you were asked that question, what was your answer?
Um, my mom is a teacher, and I was always looking up to her when she was coming back from school, like always tired, full of stories, and just like either proud or angry and so on. So when I was younger, I was always thinking like, hey, I want to be a teacher. And English was always my thing. So I kind of finished my high school and I went to the linguistic studies when I studied English philology. But then after 4 years, I felt like, okay, something is missing. So I decided to add to my studies psycholinguistics, and I went to the master's degree after my bachelor into the psycholinguistic studies. And that was already something that was happening in the brain where you kind of know how the speech is created, like how do people learn, how do people react into things. And that was already something that was, oh, actually, I like it. And then during that time, I was a teacher for like 3 years at school. It was definitely not my thing. Even though the kids liked me, and I was always doing some crazy exercises with them, connected with computer games, with some, new tech stuff that are popping up, and like I always had a good relationship with the boys in classes because they're always like, oh wait, look what she's bringing and so on. So that was pretty funny. But then I decided like, nah, it's not the thing. So I went to the business path, and I started like a typical person, like working in a call center, where after 2 months I was promoted into the team manager because I was having that kind of, how should I say, like that teaching drive. People were coming to me asking me lots of questions and so on, and they were trusting me. So I was very quickly promoted to the team manager. Then I grew bigger. Then I was a senior manager. I had 2 teams under me. Then there was a time about to get the head of the whole office title position. But at the same time, it was when I was senior, I already started keeping my eyes on esport. That was 2013, 14. And I was already following the League of Legends and everything that was happening with the first worlds, where Fnatic won, where it's like a couple of, computers, a little LAN. Then it started to growing into the EULCS, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's cool. And that was the time that my partner actually told me, like, when I was watching the games, like, look, there's no teamwork between them. Look, there's no bond. They're not talking each other. They're angry. How can you play like that? And then he was just like, hey, maybe you just tell them that, not me. And I was just like, what do you mean? I was like, text them. And they were Polish, by the way. So I just texted one of the players and I said, like, hey, when you compete, try to consider this and that because it might be helpful. And then he was just like, yeah, thank you, I really appreciate that. And then after some time, I was texted by the manager that, hey, maybe I just heard this and that. Maybe you want to have workshops with my team and explain them a little bit more. And this is how my story started. So it was at some point at the very beginning, it was just like pro bono stuff, just supporting because of my passion. But then it brought success, one team, another team, and then it was just word of reference. And I think my biggest, like, the turning point was the 2018, where I mean, my first actually bigger show up in esport was working with Rocket, where they had a very bad split. They were, I think, 0-6, and they could not, like, they were fighting for playoffs. And I remember that, so I went to Berlin. I was just having workshops. I was just fixing a lot of things with the players, the conflicts as well. And then they did not lose a single game until the end of the split. And the players were just like, talking about it very openly in media that, hey, we have someone, performance coach, that's supporting us. And then there was just like it was just like a letter of reference from the players. The more and more teams got engaged. I was contacted with many teams, and then my second bigger project was Fnatic. Fnatic that year when I was working with them, they won. They were second in the world, so it was 2018 where they lost in the finals. I was so angry that I was not with them because I know what went wrong and I know what was the mistake. Like they just got like overtrained before the final, and then when there was like no energy, no hype left, and no dopamine left to play the finals, the team is just like going into the game with the mindset like, whew, we've went so far, like no European team went that far, so we can just like give up. And when you have that approach when you go into the game, I was just so angry that they could win that. They definitely could win that. And then it was just like word of mouth, one team another, and so on. But that was the time that I was also working in the corporation, and I was just like on the edge of deciding, okay, head of the office or esport, head of the office or esport. So even though it was not very profitable at the beginning, and I feel like I was not earning much till I think I was not earning at all for like the first 2 years of my career. Then it was a little bit when I started, and then with time and with the result, like my salary was getting higher and higher, so I could upkeep myself, and it was actually fun combined with a lot of passion. So as you see, there's like a little bit of everything in that story. But if it not be passion, probably I would not even like make any changes. And I finished the business psychology degree, the master's in business psych, and it was super fun. It was super useful when working in the environment of like business. And I was coaching and I was fixing a lot of things if it comes to team conflicts, productivity, stress resistance, and so on. And I could translate that fantastically into the esport, because if it comes to like team and all the chemistry and all the rules on like all the psychological stuff that are related with people, they're translated from all disciplines. So if it's not business, I would probably never be able to work in esports. So at some point, all the dots are, connected. And now I just felt like I also want to have that sports psychology title. So I'm going to like defend my thesis in a couple of months. So by the end of the year, I will also have um, the sports psychologist title. So it's a mix of everything.
How do you find the time to do all of that? So all the studying, because that's obviously like a full-time gig. And then you have to look after a very high performance team. You're currently looking after the Counter-Strike boys with ENCE. You're traveling around the world, different time zones. And then, like you said, you have to rely on your family, your friends, which means you've got to keep those relationships going. How? How are you able to balance all of that?
I just like it, I feel like it's when you like something, when you're passionate about something, you just don't feel it. You just feel like, I'm also a mom. I have two kids. So it's coming from like when I'm at home, I'm just like, that type of mom mode. But then, I feel like, okay, I'm going to work, so I need to prepare my stuff. My kids are super supportive to me. I've got two boys actually, so so you can think that they like what I do, and they're always very curious about it. I've got a partner that is supporting me a lot, so that all wouldn't be possible without their support, and probably I would not be in a place where I'm now without them. So it's all goes down to like, hey, mom needs to work, let's do this, and it needs to be the support. Like you cannot just throw yourself without to this role, to this position when you don't like it, because the amount of hours you travel, you spend on the plane, the amount of hours you spend, uh, chasing for stuff for the players, or like, caring for their well-being. If you're not liking those type of things, if you're not enjoying it, it's a very difficult job. I know that people just think like, oh, you just go with the teams, you travel, and then I don't know, you just make sure that they eat properly or sleep properly. It's more than that, And first two travels probably were like super fun for me, but now it's all like, when my players build the routines around their performance, I also have it. I also need that space to, hey, this is the goal, this is what you need to do, this is how you should see things. It's a kind of healthy mix of everything, I guess. It's just fun for me, I just like people, I like competitive, so I guess that's my biggest drive for this.
I think so for me, I know like I got into esports because even though I wasn't great in game, I loved the competitive aspect. So I love watching that competitive side. But I do think that there has to be a gaming passion as well. I'm yet to meet someone who works in esports who doesn't love the games because at the end of the day, that's really what got us all into it. So you did mention, I mean, you started out, you were just watching League of Legends, giving some suggestions. You mentioned that you messaged a player. I mean, not everyone just randomly has the phone number of a player. So is that just because you were part of the
It was
community?
actually on Twitter. It was on
Ah,
Twitter.
there we go, Twitter. But I mean, is that were you playing League of Legends or were you just watching? I mean, what was your gaming background?
I'm a gamer. Okay, I'm a gamer. Like I used to play like since I remember, my brother was a is an IT guy, and when he was younger, he was playing quite a lot of games where my mom was constantly saying like, "Hey, start learning, just like stop playing those games." And then, it was fun for me also when I was like, even though I was a totally different person, I was not a person that was sitting at home for hours and playing games. I was always very social, and I also played volleyball semi-competitively, but then I got my injury and I had to kind of quit that. It was during my bachelor degree, where like my career was kind of popping up faster and faster. That injury just kind of killed my career. So that competitive side was super appealing to me, and playing the games. I also was playing, some shooter games. Then it was a bit of, World of Warcraft. Everyone's probably trying it. Then, of course, League of Legends. Then I was trying a little bit of Dota. So I got interested into CS, into Valorant. So, like, when you have passion and you want to discover those games and you want to know, like, how they work, that's definitely helping me out in the things I do. Whereas in sport, I also have a couple of sport athletes that I'm supporting. I also have swimmers, sailors. I used to work with a basketball player, but due to the lack of time, I had to kind of, I had to quit that. But seeing how similar sport athletes and esport athletes are, and how similar the mistakes are, and like I guess it's all helping me out. And you need to have that passion and that competitive spark you said, because otherwise, if you just don't like the environment and what you do, it'll be difficult with that type of work where you just feel like, oh, the computer players, that the esport athletes are constantly talking about how much they have to, spend in front of the computer, or they spend like 12 hours. Like, hey, stop doing that. That's easy, No, it's not easy, that hunger for like research, for watching demos, for watching, other players playing. That's so big that at some point, yes, you can tell them to stop that. But if you don't give them other points of like resources or like the reasoning, or you don't kind of justify that, at some point, it's not only like stop that because you'll get burnout.
I do think esports is one of those industries where if you're not passionate about it, like you're not going to last because you're not going to sit there for a 12-hour day watching everyone play and compete if you don't have that sort of love for the game. I think that that is something that kind of gets missed occasionally where people don't understand that that is the joy that esports brings us is being able to watch everyone play.
Yeah, I mean, the love for the game is needed, but then, you need to also have understanding what can you do when you constantly do the same thing on and on. And esport is just doing it. Like, when you're a gamer, you just play the game for a couple of hours a day until you just don't get fed up with it. Then if you pick up the path of being an esport athlete, hey, that game is going to stay with you for some time. So you need to have something you do outside of, playing this game. You need to have people you can, you know, build your social connection with. You need to have friends. You need to have a life. There's so many players. This is not being told very openly and loud. There are so many players that actually complete, master's degrees, bachelor degrees. They study and they also are esport athletes, and that's healthy. So yes, love for the game is one thing, but love for the life is another thing. You cannot just be, um, I would say, a nerd that is sitting 12 hours in front of the computer and having poor communication, poor relationship with people, because you will not survive in esport environment. And even if you look at tennis players like, Djokovic. This guy is having a family, kids, and is competing on the highest level. Like, there is a work-life balance everywhere. Even though mentally we don't feel the exhaustion when we sit in front of the computer, our body is working very hard in the trainings. So that's why people feel like, hey, I'm just playing, I'm not training. That's not true. I mean, if you're playing, yes, but if you're training, you would feel like, hey, I need a break, I'm tired. So love, yes, but also reasoning, like being reasonable with things. That's the second thing.
One of the things that I get asked about a lot, because obviously being in South Africa, esports is very new. So whenever I get interviewed by media here, their favorite question is esports a sport? And I know you mentioned the similarities between sports athletes and esports athletes. I mean, how do you answer a question like that? Because I never really know what to say. I'm like, I can try and defend this, but yes, it is like a sport, but also there is fundamental differences. I mean, how would you define it if you could, or answer that question?
So I would say I don't want esport to be sport because esport is strong enough to be an independent discipline. We don't need to put a qualifier on it like it is a part of sport. No, it's a competitive. It's as competitive as sport, but it's a different branch. It's a different. I would say, I don't know, creation, if I can call it like that. I don't like the fact that people want to label it. Esport is esport. It's independent. It's different than sport. It it has its similarities, but it's, I would say, a little bit more, how to say it? It's very heavy to be an esport athlete. Like, you can be a sport athlete for longer periods of time than an esport athlete. The amount of, as you said, the amount of travels, the amount of time that players spend, you do not see, like, imagine a football player traveling as much as an esport athlete. Like, that's impossible. Like, they would not be able to cope with it. That's why different triggers, different people are needed in this environment, the people that understand what's going on. Because if you just put, there were some situations where actually a sport coach was, I think it was back in the TSM sometime, when a sport coach was put into the esport team, and then 2 days after he tweeted something like, "For me, esport players will never be athletes." I mean, he was he was totally like, hated by the whole environment. But then on the other hand, yes, we will never be sport athletes. We will be esport athletes, We're different type of people. We have different expectations. We have different understanding of the stuff we do. And it's quite often there are lots of people that are coming from sport that do not understand esport. They do not open themselves for esport, and that's why they fail. We had quite a few performance coaches or sports psychologists that came from the esport background, and then they were forcing them the sport, like the heavy sport trainings in those teams. The players could not handle it. They're fantastic people from the sport environment that are passionate about esport, and they keep that balance, and they're very successful. But you need to have that understanding. Without that, when you try to copy things from sport to esport, they will not work. You need to have that understanding, like what's the difference. So I would say I would always be repeating, for me, esport doesn't need to be labeled as a sport because it's independent enough, it's big enough to be labeled as esport, and that's the beauty of it, I guess. So I don't know if that answers, but that's my vision on it.
I love it. I'm going to steal that answer the next time I get asked that
Go ahead.
question. I'm
Go
curious
ahead.
as well. I mean, like you mentioned there, the transitioning from sport to esport as a performance coach. I mean, do you find that the barrier to entry to do what you do, specifically in the esports realm, is it quite nuanced? Do you think it's quite difficult for someone to get into it?
It will be difficult if a person is very stuck in a specific habits and a specific, I would say, like beliefs. You need to have that dose of understanding of what's going on in esport. Without that, the transition will be very, very heavy. And we've seen many, support people that were just, convert, like trying to find themselves in esports, but they never did. And it's not only about sports psychologists or performance coaches, it's also about physiotherapists, it's also about the coaches, it's also about people that are trying to be in the like manager's role or social media and so on. That's a different type of world, and you need to have the understanding of it to be able to function in it, because it's a little bit like, you know, you can send I don't know what kind of comparison to give, but like sometimes when we travel, oh, that's a good comparison. When we travel all around the world, and we travel to a specific country and we have our own habits, it's difficult for us to find ourselves in that country if we do not change the habits, because the country can be so much different. And it's exactly the same. You need to be able to change, adapt, and then yes, then that's possible. And I'm always, I'm working quite a lot with with some sport practitioners, uh, and I kind of also like encourage them to look into esport, and like we do quite a lot of projects together. We attend conferences together, and now they look at esport totally different. Like they're fascinated by the changes, by the beauty, by the differences of it. So if you have that open mind and you look at it as something new, as a new world to be explored, you have all the right to be successful. But if you're very narrow-minded and you feel like I know the best, not being in the environment, that can be a beginning of a failure.
How hard is it for you when, specifically with esport, where you're jumping between different titles? So, say, for example, like a League of Legends and a Counter-Strike. Those are completely different games. The games themselves change all the time. And I'm presuming, as the performance coach, you need to be up to date with some of those changes. Like we know now we're moving into CS2. That's also going to be pretty tough because I presume that just adds like a whole extra layer to your job of keeping up to date with the games and different games as well, not just one specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it helps a lot when you play the game and when you know the game and when you watch the game. So that helps a lot because you know what the players are struggling with, and you know what's going on, like in the community, because that's also important, because quite often the community can also put a lot of pressure on the players, and I mean, like from hate to support to saying like, hey, go retire, you have no rights to be here. That can be also heavy. So yes, that is helping me a lot to know the title and to know what's going on. However, they were also titles that I managed to coach very successfully without playing the game. And one of those games is, for example, Apex. Like, I've never played that game. For me, this game is too kind of like, I don't know, like I'm too bad at this game basically. So I never went to like more than, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, and I was just like, nope. But I've got also players that when they know that I want to support them and I've never been playing the game, always like, okay, first meeting, okay, I introduce myself, we talk a little bit about it, and then my thing is like, tell me a little bit about your things. There's one thing, I need you to teach me the game so I can help you out. And that is also super important. In many cases, when I coach someone that I do not play the game, um, I need that knowledge, that basic, or that kind of grasp of like what's going on, because for me it's still like a work impact. The same as with poker, I also support poker stables where I work with poker players. And at the beginning, I've never been playing poker, like not high stakes, only casually with friends and just like for fun for those chips that cost nothing. But it's a totally different game when you play it, competitively, when you play it to earn money. And that's also an experience that I had to take. I had to go to the casino. I had to watch them playing. I had to see the emotions. I had to learn what does it mean to take. And then for me, it was just like, okay, I downloaded the app and I was just like, I'm not going to spend money on this game because I'm bad at it, but I just want to know the emotion. So what I did, I don't know, I think I put like $50 or something. And I was just like, go girl, lose it. And I was playing very low stakes, but then I was just feeling those emotions. I knew exactly when I was tilting, when, you know, I don't know, I had 80% of chances of winning the specific, pool, and then somebody had 20 and they just won, and I was just like, what just happened? And I know, like, okay, so I know what they're struggling with, and I know how it's going to impact my work. So these are the moments when they need to stay calm, when they need to like visualize, and when they need to kind of see the outcome, how they're supposed to behave, not to get tilted. So it's helping a lot. But I don't think it's necessary to go that deep into the game, to like, I've never had an ambition to, I don't know, grind the game to go diamond or to be like whatever top level. Like for me, if I get out of silver and I was touching gold, okay, that's enough. Like I know the game now. Like I know what people do, I know what people play, that's okay. So I guess it's understanding of those games is helping me to transition very fast. But the basic is the same. So if it comes to conflicts, if it comes to communication, if it comes to routines, if it comes to um, learning the stress factors, and then help them to solve the issues. So I would say knowing the game, it's like 30 to 40% of my work, whereas the big picture is still with the human aspect and what kind of emotions are with them in a specific moment.
Makes complete sense. So now this is like the one, I suppose, negative question that I have. It is negative in that you have to think some negative thoughts, but what is the hardest part about your job? If you had to look at that one thing that is like the icky thing we all go, oh, that's really tough, and I'm not the biggest fan of doing that. What would you say is that for you?
I guess the difficult part is sometimes difficult is being honest. When you know that like the person you're trying to work with or the person that you're trying to support is just like not changing, not seeing the big picture, and you know the consequences, and you know what's going to happen in like 2 3 days, or like in the tournament, and like, hey, this person is not going to perform in like today's game, and we're probably going to lose because of ABCD, and you cannot kind of impact this because this is the path the person decided to choose, and you just see like, okay, they're not performing today, like you knew, like you expected. But then you cannot prevent everything, and you cannot just be the person that telling like, hey, you're going to be very bad today because ABCD, and you need to allow the person to make the mistake and to learn from the mistake so it's productive. I think that's the big part for me. And because it's a little bit like, treating addiction or something. If someone has a specific habit, and if someone doesn't want to change the habit, even though the habit is bad, you can be the best therapist in the world, but you'll do nothing about it. Uh, there needs to be like the inside willingness to change, and there need to be that openness to kind of, hey, I'm ready. Like I want to start, like, change process. I want to be better. Like I want to improve myself mentally too, because quite often when I start working with players, they have, especially the young players, like 18 to 20, they have that, I would say, false idea that um, only in-game skill will allow them to win tournament, which is, if you compare, like, which is like the same in esport. I really like Djokovic is very vocal lately about, the mental side. The same as with Iga Świątek, that just, they just won Roland Garros. Um, they're very vocal that a big part of the success is their skill, like how they play tennis, what they're good at. But none of the victory would happen if their mental will not be stable, if their preparation would not be there, if the productivity would not be there, if they would not have someone to talk about, I just got up and I feel so bad. It's like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's see how we can impact your day. What can we do to change it? What happened that you feel bad? Maybe you can speak with someone, maybe this, maybe that. That's my role. And if I see that the person is just, struggling inside, but not ready to change, I know that the performance would be like super unstable depending on the mood. But until I see the willingness to change. I can try my best. I can do a lot of suggestions, but I cannot force person to change, and that's very hard for me personally because I'm very emotional and I'm very like I feel the emotions of people around me, and when I feel like a player is sad after the game, after his or her performance, when the player is angry at themselves because they did not do something, and then they feel embarrassed because of it, because they let themselves down, they let the team down, they let the coaches down, the org down, or whatever. I know how heavy it is for them. So it's also heavy for me because I knew how to prevent it. I knew how to do things, but without a person that would be just like, "Hey, help me out with it." I'm just being a bad cop, just just telling people like, "Hey, you should change this." I'll not change it. I'm just like, okay. I mean, that this is what I can do, and quite often, the bad story is that people have amazing potential and they have amazing skill, and they're just blowing away their skill with themselves being stubborn and not very open to feedback. And that's the part that that it's hard for me to carry. And working for so many years in esports with so many organizations, I also get used to players and to get used to people. And when I have a player, when I see like he or she doesn't want to change, and the orgs is kind of struggling because of this, because the team cannot do this, cannot the team cannot do that, cannot get promoted because there's like unstable behavior and performance, then what do we do? After some time we say A, B, C, nothing changes. Okay, we need to replace. And when I'm attached to a person like that, and then there's a placement, I also feel those emotions and everything that's happening, and it's making me very like uncomfortable and sad, mostly because like I cannot save the world, I cannot help everyone, but I know that if specific things could have been changed, it would be better. It would be to their benefit. So I would say I always treat it as my personal failure, where I know it should not be my failure because it's the person's decision. But yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy to carry, especially if you know how much time you spend to kind of go into the person, try to do something, but then you still there's like a wall and you just can't go through it. So yeah, these are I think these are like the heaviest things to carry for me.
They're already heavy. I mean, would you then say that the reverse is true, that the best part about your job is when that wall comes down and you're able to break through?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's the thing that I can tell you that when we were now in Dallas and when we were about to face the finals, after the game with FaZe, when they played so many rounds, it was super exhausting, super tiring. But when I saw my guys leaving the game, laughing, being proud of themselves, and having the mindset like, hey, that was already a final for us, when they were entering the stage in the finals day, when they bowing, that was the moment I cried because I knew that they already won. Because I saw their faces, I saw the commitment, I saw the fun that they're going to have today, and you just know, like knowing them for so long, you know that there is a win. And funny thing was that I was checking my pulse and comparing my pulse on the watch during the phase game and during the final. And during the phase game, my pulse was just like skyrocketing. Like I was so close to heart attack like twice or three times. But during the finals, where that was supposed to be the moment for me of stress, I was flat, like no emotions. Like I was already certain of like what's going to happen. So that kind of shows you like how you need to know your players to know what's coming. Like quite often I am able to like foresee what's going to happen, but then it's not always that I can tell them. So for me, those moments where I see them smiling, when I see that there's no wall, there is a big connection, there's a lot of fun and a lot of trust from their side to me and to what I do, uh, yeah, that's amazing. Quite often, the players just, we just walk after the game and they're just like, hey, that one is on you, and that's my smile. That's something that I really appreciate. And um, when I come back to my room, to vent out, to get myself. It's just like these are the moments that I either go in tears from happiness or from from sadness, but try not to show it or like do that around the players. So yeah.
I think what you do is so important. And this is, I mean, I'm biased, but for me, the thing that I love specifically about Counter-Strike is the mental game. So it's something I bring up whenever I'm desk hosting. Everyone gets annoyed with me, especially the analysts, because I think it's important to talk about what's happening in the game, but I'm always like, if you're with the players on LAN, sometimes you can see who's, like you mentioned, you can actually see who's going to win before they win, because you can just tell by the energy that they're exuding and the positivity or the lack of positivity. You can sometimes see it on their faces. And that for me is always fascinating as well. And I think that's why I love competition, because you can be the best and definitely hard work and talent, but there is a level of mental fortitude that has to come into play either to win or to bring yourself back up. So I think what you do is the most incredible job. I can't imagine how much it takes out of you personally, but I find it fascinating. I love watching you
Thank you.
work. And I'm so glad that we got to learn a little bit more about what it is you do. For those listening, if they want to find out more about you, maybe they want to follow your journey, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter as Xirreth with double R. I'm also on Instagram and on Facebook. My Instagram is mostly active when I travel with my team. Like daily, I hardly ever post or anything. But during the competition, which is actually a couple of weeks in the month, like I think 2 weeks in a month, then I'm usually active there. But Twitter is usually the place where I'm super active. So Xirreth on most of the social media, I guess. So you can find me there.
You've been listening to Tech Girl Talks. This is season 4. That's my job, where we focus on some of the interesting jobs in the esports industry. There's actually 3 other seasons as well. So if you're a Counter-Strike fan, season 3 is all about Counter-Strike. Season 1 and 2 is all about the business of esports. So make sure you go give it a listen. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like and subscribe on whatever channel you're listening or watching it on. And if you want to talk to me a little bit more about what you've heard or the podcast in general, you can find me on social media at TechGirlZA, pretty much everywhere.